Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan, and it is, in 1 second, exactly 11 o'clock. It's time for Headliners, in which I will be joined by the creme de la creme of the UK comedy circuit to look at tomorrow's papers. So many great stories to get through. I'll see you after the headlines with Olivia.
Thank you, Mark. Here are the headlines in the GB newsroom. In the last half an hour, it's been announced the legal requirement to self-isolate after testing positive for COVID in England is coming to an end next week. The Prime Minister will announce the change as part of his Living with COVID plan. Downing Street says Boris Johnson intends to repeal all coronavirus restrictions on public freedom in an announcement on Monday. There are reports of multiple loud explosions in the centre of the separatist-controlled city of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine. It's after top Ukrainian military officials have reportedly come under fire in the region. A video shows lawmakers, soldiers and foreign journalists running from what appears to be shelling. The group was on a tour of the conflict zone when the attack happened. Meanwhile, the Kremlin's confirmed it successfully launched hypersonic and cruise missiles at sea and land-based targets as part of nuclear drills. The military exercise was overseen by President Vladimir Putin and the leader of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian crisis has been dominating the agenda at the Munich Security Conference. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has warned the world can't underestimate what's at stake if Russia invades Ukraine. He told the conference it's vital any act of violence or aggression by President Putin fails.
After a generation of freedom, we're now staring at a generation of bloodshed and misery. I believe that Russia would have absolutely nothing to gain from this catastrophic venture and everything to lose.
More bad weather is set to hit the UK, with forecasters warning winds of up to 70 miles an hour are expected over the next couple of days. Thousands of homes are still without power after Storm Eunice swept across the country yesterday, with insurers saying the clean-up bill could exceed £300 million. Record-breaking winds killed at least 4 people, damaged buildings and brought down trees, blocking routes across the rail network. Over in Canada, police are using pepper spray and stun grenades to clear protesters from the capital, Ottawa. Demonstrators were pushed back after a 3-week blockade against vaccine mandates for lorry drivers. More than 100 people were arrested yesterday. A helicopter has crashed dangerously close to a crowded beach in Miami. The aircraft, which was carrying 3 passengers, plunged into the ocean near an area full of swimmers. No one on the beach was injured, but 2 of those on board were transported to a local hospital in stable conditions. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to headliners.
It's 3 minutes past 11. I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners, in which we take a comedic romp through tomorrow's papers in the company of two luminaries from the world of UK comedy. Tenderly clasping one of my hands tonight is Andrew Doyle, and firmly grasping the other, I think it's my hand, is Nick Dixon. Gentlemen, how are we?
Fine. It's a very
Lots to get through.
A lot of innuendo. So
it's very adult. It's not often you get to be on telly at 11 o'clock, so let's have some fun with it.
There we go.
In fact, I may achieve nudity before the show's out.
Wow. We could turn the whole thing to a game of strip poker.
Well, we could do, although suddenly I'm thinking, no, let's keep our viewers and let's stick to tomorrow's papers. And let's have a look at what we've got. Let's start, shall we, with the Sunday Telegraph. Britain warned of cyber attacks as Russia flexes military might. NHS trusts to be paid for clearing the pandemic backlog. Have they not been paid already? And Russell Group universities have amassed a £2.2 billion surplus. I would humbly suggest they give that to the students who have spent 2 years stuck on Zoom. The independent Ukraine leader condemns appeasement of Russia. The Observer, West plans to arm resistance if Russian forces occupy Ukraine. The Sunday Mirror, a special investigation. Home Office probes racist staff WhatsApp group. Whistleblower exposes vile messages sent by immigration workers. The Sunday Times revealed the wealthy donors with the Prime Minister's ear, a story we'll be tackling shortly, and abuse rife on Tinder for teens. Daily Star Sunday, last but not least, showbiz exclusive. 80s legend Toyah Wilcox reveals she's being haunted by a violent ghost. It's a mystery, say the Sunday Star. Think twice before accepting an invitation to Toyah Wilcox's gaffe. An angry ghoul tried to choke a ghostbuster the pop legend 63 had welcomed into her home. You just wind your neck in, spook. And that is... Oh dear, I'm all of a fluster. Well, let's sink our teeth into tomorrow's papers. And shall we start with... Let's have a look. Lots of stories to get through, Andrew and Nick. This one definitely caught my eye in terms of the stories we've been looking at all evening. And it's the West, and it's Ukraine, and it's in the Observer, Nick.
Yes, West plans to arm resistance if Russian forces occupy Ukraine. And Boris Johnson has chipped in and said Russia must fail and be seen to fail if it invades. So it's this ongoing Russia crisis. Is it a crisis? I don't know anymore. I don't even know how real it is anymore. It keeps carrying on. Who knows what's happening? Is it Putin testing us? Or are our Western media sort of fanning the flames, as Edward Snowden claimed in a tweet? I can't even tell. And even Boris here, is he sort of fanning the flames and grandstanding, or is he generally trying to tamp it down? It's a very odd situation, because Corbyn has come out sort of supporting Russia, which isn't that surprising. But even people like Peter Hitchens are sort of looking at it saying, well, come on, could Putin really realistically invade Ukraine? And how could he'd have to occupy Ukraine then with this economy the size of Italy or New York State, depending on who you ask? What do you think, Andrew? You're looking at me like you want to say something. Like you wanted to speak on a television show.
Andrew is very pro-Putin, and I think it's important.
I know.
Unbelievable.
That. He was
You're
itching
in the pocket
to say
of the
that.
Russians. You arrived here tonight in a gold-plated Bentley.
No, I'm very pro his images of him sort of wrestling with bears and stuff like that. Just because I quite like the homoeroticism, all of that. But what I would say about this issue in particular is, now look, I can't ever predict, and whenever I predict anything in politics, I get it wrong. So I'm not going to attempt to do so now. But what I would say is all of this talk about it being inevitable, we had talk like that last April when we had, troops massing on the border, and people said it was imminent, it was inevitable, then it didn't happen. Then at the start of this week, we had people saying, oh, it was definitely going to happen on Wednesday, the 16th of February. That's when it was going to happen. The Sun said it was at 1 a.m. The Mirror said it was at 3 a.m. So people knew exactly when it was going to happen. Didn't happen. Reuters had a sort of live stream from Kiev, and there was nothing to see. So I'm just saying, they're a bit like, those cults that say, oh, the end of the world is going to happen on this date, and then it doesn't happen, and they say, oh, well, we still got it right, and they fudge it. It just strikes me, I'm not saying it won't happen, but it strikes me that again and again, people are predicting this and saying that it's inevitable, and I'm not surprised that people are starting to say, is this just our media fanning the flames? And this is having serious effects on Ukraine. I mean, their foreign investment they're losing, I think they said between $2 billion and $3 billion a month, because people are now nervous about investing in Ukraine. And to what extent has that just been a consequence of people fanning the flames in the media and politicians in America and over here? for something that, let's face it, may not happen.
And the interesting thing was when it didn't happen, Putin was able to say, see, it was Western propaganda. We were never going to invade.
Right,
Did you see that? And now it's back to maybe they are going to invade.
Actually, there's a funny thing that apparently, I didn't know this, I read this today, apparently the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman in Russia has asked the Western media to publish the timetable of our invasions for the coming year because I'd like to plan my holidays.
Well,
in other words, it's a joke to them. They think our constant doom-mongering is funny.
Yeah, it's a bit like those fights you used to have at school, where you go, oh, Steve is going to have a fight with Bob at 1 o'clock in the school playground, and when people would turn up, and it was often a non-event.
Right, exactly.
Was there anyone actually called Bob in your school, though? I don't totally believe that story.
It's an old man name.
I'm thinking there weren't any actual fights at your school, is what I'm thinking.
I didn't go to school in the 1950s. I think that's a fair point. How many Western leaders are leveraging the crisis in Ukraine for their own political interests, including Joe Biden, who has been accused of talking this up? Suggesting basically the messaging from Washington has been there will be an invasion, and people are scratching their heads as to why the White House is saying that.
Well, it makes sense that Johnson is saying it. It makes sense that he goes out there in his new green tie that Carrie picked out for him, because I think, and he's talking about he's not going to rule out 11th hour diplomacy and all these grandiose statements, because of course, his premiership is hanging by a thread, and this has got, this could be his Falklands moment. So I don't want to be cynical because I say all this, and maybe they'll invade tomorrow. And I think it's obviously very serious if they do.
Sorry,
but no, go on. Sorry.
No, I was going to say you think it's a dead cat. I said on here before it's the ultimate dead cat, World War III. But the thing about Biden, though, you say he's playing up, but at the same time he's basically said Ukraine aren't part of NATO, so we won't really do that much anyway. That's what I saw him say.
Well, we might enter World War III, but The Guardian will still be talking about Partygate. Let's move on to our next story. The Sunday Times leading with the ultra-rich Tory donors, Andrew. I'm very surprised about that. I didn't realise the Tories took money from rich people.
It's a big shock, isn't it? That this particular story is talking about how if you give a substantial donation, say £250,000 to the Conservatives, you can become part of what they call a secret advisory board. I would have assumed people would have thought this was happening in any case. But effectively, what this Times article is talking about is how this has been revealed now by Lord Udney Lister. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Udney Lister.
Character, I think, from, was it Nicholas Nickleby?
Or P.G. Wodehouse, something like that.
One of those.
But he's basically said, he's confirmed that it's real. So this is the first time that the existence of the advisory board has been absolutely confirmed. And before now, it was never confirmed, apparently. And because this body is from within the government, from the Conservative Party, not technically within the government, it means its activities fall outside of the transparency laws, and that's why it hasn't been revealed up until now. But effectively, what you've had is people sort of meeting together on Zoom or Teams or whatever, and talking with top ministers. Apparently, there's an implication here that these people even get some access to the Prime Minister. Well, I would have assumed that because they can't get their funding from taxpayers for the party. I would have assumed this kind of thing would happen anyway. And I've seen The West Wing. I know that American politics all happens this way. You basically buy the presidency and you can tell them what to do, right? Isn't that right?
With one great exception, that Trump had his own money, so he was just able to tell the truth with no influence at all.
Pro-Trump.
Well, you set me up for it there.
There is something to be said for rich politicians who don't need the money, but is inflation now so bad that £250,000 is just a substantial amount? An enormous amount of money.
I see what you mean.
Or is it that the culture within the Conservative Party is that kind of cash is small change?
Yeah, I see what you mean. I'm just gutted Leo's not here to talk about the dodgy contracts. He always talks about dodgy contracts the Tories get every week, and this is another example, isn't it? I don't know. I haven't had time to go into it in massive detail, but it's like this who funds you thing. I know what you mean. It's inevitable that someone funds you. There's always this attack on the internet if you say anything, who's funding them or who funds you. But you have to be funded by someone, don't you?
Yeah. So the question is actually about control. So it's with all of these things. If you write for a publication which is funded by someone, people say, "Oh, who funds you?" And the implication being you don't mean what you say. You're just sort of like a marionette. You're a puppet to
follow the money they say.
Exactly,
like Trudeau is for the World Economic Forum.
That kind of conspiracy, right? But the thing about
he does have a tattoo of Klaus Schwab on his neck. I've seen that.
But look, the truth is,
I've seen the videos.
Enough of this. The truth is, however, that if we're talking about things like funding to the Tory party, it depends on how much control they have over it. And if they don't, then I don't see what's wrong with an advisory
Some would
board.
argue that it's healthy that entrepreneurs want to engage with our government because they want to be successful, pay more tax and employ more people.
Sure. Maybe, but
Keir Starmer attacked Boris Johnson during the pandemic for being on friendly terms with James Dyson.
Right.
And this was when we were trying to secure ventilators. And the line of attack was, this guy's a billionaire, why are you WhatsApping him? And the Prime Minister could reasonably argue, well, I was trying to get my hands on ventilators to save lives.
Sure. And on a really good vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, I think he'd like one of those handheld would be quite nice. Do you think the Dyson ventilators are a bit more nicely designed? Do you think they look really good in the kitchen?
Is that what it is? I don't know much
So it
about
saves
that
your
kind of
life, and it looks really great as well.
Well, if it looks good, that's the most important thing.
Just a thought, though.
Yes.
I've long lobbied for political parties to be funded by the state so that they're not in hock to anyone, because I'm not really comfortable with the Conservatives in the pocket of big business, and I'm not happy or comfortable with Labour being in the pocket of the unions.
Yeah. You don't mean literally lobbied, though, Mark. You haven't, like, spent dodgy money, because then you're part of the problem.
I've been to Whitehall. I've been to secret meetings. Partygate was my idea.
Yeah.
I brought the booze.
Have you just given them £250,000 to get in?
Of course I have.
Yeah.
But look, it's a substantial amount for Mrs. Dolan, let me tell you. But wouldn't that be the answer, is for political parties to be funded by the government?
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to live in a plutocracy, which is effectively, I think, what you could...
Walt Disney? Dog with the floppy ears.
Where dogs
We're
run...
putting him in charge now, are we?
That's where I was going with that, absolutely. You know what I mean? You don't want the multimillionaires running the country, basically.
Yeah,
and
I think that's right.
I don't think that... but I don't mind that if they want to make these kind of donations, they then have some kind of recognition for that within the... I mean, that seems fine to me.
If you'd like to make a small donation of £250,000 to myself, Nick and Andrew, you'd be very welcome.
Yeah.
Give you our details later in the show. Sunday's Independent are reporting that Jeffrey Epstein's agent has been found dead in his cell. Nick, pretty shocking story.
Yep, Jean-Luc Brunel found dead in cell. So he was someone who allegedly procured young girls for Epstein, and his legal team have said that he's killed himself, and his decision was not driven by guilt but by a deep sense of injustice. Some on the internet might claim it was driven by a bloke in the next cell with a suspicious amount of cigarette money suddenly. I couldn't allege that, though. The point is that the point is
what you like about him now, I'll be honest.
Well, this is satire. It's pure satire, satirical purposes. The point is Epstein killed himself, and now this guy has definitely killed himself.
So you're going full on with the theory that...
No, I'm saying it's obviously they both killed themselves.
Well, I mean, we don't know.
I don't want to get sued.
With all of this stuff, we just don't know. And it's often in these cases where there's a very, very serious allegation of this kind, particularly of a sexual nature, when someone does kill themselves, that is taken of evidence of guilt. Often it can be evidence of the opposite, actually, because you're being accused of the worst possible thing.
Yeah.
And that can utterly devastate you as well. So the truth is, surely we can also admit we don't know what happened here. I mean,
although it's not wrong. And here at GB News, we ask the questions that others are afraid to ask, and there are people that think Epstein was knocked off, that there was such a vested interest in this man not being around anymore that he didn't take his own life, and we've got no reason to believe that neither of these were suicides, but people will ask. The question is, with the settlement that Prince Andrew achieved this week, and with this sad suicide, it is a sad story, whatever way you look at it, does this close the chapter on this story, do you think?
I mean, certainly not in the case of Prince Andrew, because there isn't a non-disclosure agreement within that settlement. There's a substantial amount is a charity donation. There's also damages within that, but there's no NDA, and that means that Giuffre can go on, and she'll probably write books about this, probably talk about it again in other circumstances, which is her right. Do you
think she'll be a bit nicer about him now that she's received £12 million from him?
I mean, I couldn't possibly say.
It's a substantial figure.
But the point I'm trying to make is that I don't think she will.
Fall back.
I don't think it will go away. I don't think it can possibly go away now.
Yeah, well, as I said, whatever way you look at it, a very sad story, and the whole affair is an unedifying spectacle. What a shame a member of British royalty got involved. Now, Sunday's Metro and Captain Tom Moore's charity is in a bit of trouble, getting some negative headlines, Andrew.
That's right, and the Captain Tom Foundation is being scrutinised at the moment by the Charity Commission, a regulatory compliance people. It's been revealed that that Captain Tom's daughter was put up as its CEO and was going to be getting a salary of £150,000 a year. And they've now put a stop. The Charity Commission's put a stop to that because they see that as presumably because they see that as nepotism. And that figure, as it says here in the article here in the Metro, that represents 13.68% of the charity's total first-year income. Now, we had a story a couple of weeks ago, didn't we, about the same foundation being not investigated, but it was being revealed that a substantial amount of the money that they had raised was going on management fees and on admin and that kind of thing. I just don't know in terms of charities, how much of the money that is raised is often just frittered away on these various things, but it's not necessarily going to the people it was meant to go to.
Yeah,
which is the problem.
And what was interesting was that when the watchdog started discussions with Miss Ingram Moore, she took the decision that the CEO role was not something she wished to pursue, so she could focus on other commitments. So once it came out, she suddenly went, "Tell you what, I'll leave it."
So she said, "I didn't want it anyway."
I didn't want it anyway. I
didn't want the six-figure salary anyway.
Exactly.
Well, of course, you know, perhaps her people would argue that to run an organisation of that scale would possibly involve a six-figure salary, because equivalent charities will have a management structure, and those people are paid quite well. So are we being a little bit partisan in the way that we're reporting?
Well, you see, the figure was suspicious because, look, a salary of 150,000 would be comparable to the RSPCA, which was recorded as paying its top earner 150,000, but they had an annual income of 140 million, which was 100 times that of the Captain Tom Foundation. So it's like, why was the amount so large?
On the other hand, she would be well placed to run that foundation. She would have an emotional investment in making sure that it, you know, I'm not saying she would have been the wrong candidate.
No.
But nevertheless, what has happened is she stepped down.
And also the financial package for the chief of the RSPCA, a lot of that comes in those little sort of nibbly biscuits, Whiskers.
Is that right?
Pedigree chum, yeah.
Oh, OK.
And chewy toys. So
I'm not sure.
They're not only motivated by money.
I'm not sold on charity. I think it's all a big scam.
Just charity?
Charity, yeah. It's just another excuse for people to harass you in the street, which is already a problem for me anyway, because of all my fans. But do you know what I mean?
You're such a misanthrope. It's unbelievable. Incredible. And you're trying to dress up this as a virtue. It's you being mean.
Even the cats cross the road to avoid him. Well, look, whichever charity you donate to, do have a look at their website and have a look at where the money goes. One word of advice, don't give any money to a new organisation called the Nick Dixon Comedy Fund, because they've got some dark stuff going on, let me tell you. That money is not going to the right place. Well, we've got lots more to get through in part 2 of the show. We'll be discussing buying online breast milk, guilty as charged, a reprieve for foie gras, and feral youths. Sounds like tonight's panel. See you in 2.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Mark Dolan, and I will be taking a look through tomorrow's papers in the company of the respected, admired and adored Andrew Doyle. And someone his mother thinks is amazing is Nick Dixon.
Why? Why always the hate?
I'm only kidding. Your mother, we asked your mother for a quote, she said, meh.
And doesn't your mother always respond about
My mum
your
loves the
appearance
show.
on the show? Yeah.
She's a huge fan.
Can we just send our love to Mrs. Dixon, who did an amazing job and gave young Nick to the world? We won't go into the details of how it happened, but he's here, and God bless you for that. According to The Observer, online breast milk sales are booming. An obvious one for you, Nick?
Yeah, I don't know where this... It seems all weirdly linked, but yeah, growing sales of breast milk.
I wish we hadn't mentioned your dear mother.
I know. It was a mistake. So growing sales of breast milk online amid warning about risks. So experts have sounded the alarm over a growing trend for selling human breast milk online, warning that it can contain harmful bacteria, drugs and viruses, including HIV. But you see, what's happened is in recent weeks, after reports on social media of women earning as much as £10,000 from selling their milk to bodybuilders. Now, by the way, everyone knows I work out, but I don't take it that far, OK?
I was going to ask you about that, because I didn't know that breast milk was a thing for you people.
No, that's the line for me. Get your protein from other sources, guys. Chicken, protein shakes, you don't need to go there. But yes, because of that, there's been a rise in this selling of breast milk. And the problem is, as someone points out here, we need to remember it's a body fluid, and that is key. That was Dr. Sarah Steele at the University of Cambridge. It is a body fluid. And
Listen, I said it was 11 o'clock, but can we not get carried away?
Right, exactly. But I'm trying to stay within the realms of respectability, Mark. The point is, people are now sending it via Royal Mail with they're not freezing it properly, they're not pasteurising it as you're supposed to. They're just sending it, they're saying, look, I've got some breast milk, here it is. They're sticking it on eBay, which they're not allowed to do, and just saying, any takers.
I mean, this is making me feel a little bit nauseous. I mean, is it just what they're doing, like sort of putting it in a jiffy bag and hoping it doesn't leak? What's all this? It sounds gross.
It seems to be. Breast milk is obviously, I guess, nutritious. It's very natural. But I wondered whether there was a fetishistic element to this. Could there be?
I mean, presumably, if it's the bodybuilders, presumably it's new mothers who need breast milk, maybe, or there could be a fetishy element to it. I don't know. And they say here that when you send it by Royal Mail, it's not temperature controlled, so that bacteria can develop. Like you say, you don't know where it comes from. At least when you have cow's milk, you have a sense of what the cows have been up to. You know, I don't. Well,
exactly.
Because what can they get up to?
That's actually a serious point, because they do checks. If you get it properly at milk banks, they do a load of checks, don't they, about your lifestyle and so on. But here they don't. Some people. One person said they're going to put a frozen gel pack with it, and that is at least keeping it cool. But they were banned from eBay because you're not allowed to sell it.
I just wonder though. We're very worried, aren't we, about global warming, and we know that the dairy industry, livestock, produces a lot of emissions. Is the answer to have more female breast milk in our diets? I mean, could it go mainstream?
No.
Could you get a litre of the stuff from Sainsbury's?
I'm just going to say no, and I'm going to say soy milk. Or oat milk.
No, really? Soy is terrible for you. Do you
well, what about this? You could have a brand, right? A nice big glass of Sandra's Finest.
So you're suggesting people go to Starbucks and ask
a picture of the lady that made it.
You want people to go in and ask for a breast milk latte?
But that's not even.
I mean, that's disgusting.
That's not as embarrassing as a decaf.
No, it's not. I'm not saying breast milk is disgusting, by the way. I'm just saying that there's something kind of just too.
You're not hating on women again.
That's not even satire.
Of course I'm not. Of course I'm not.
What Mark's saying is not even satire. The woman that was selling it for 10 grand, there was a picture of her saying, "Hey, this is my breast milk." It's not even satire. What you're saying is literally happening, and what you're saying is soy is terrible for you because it creates soy boys. Have you not been on the internet?
This is such a info wars.
It creates a kind of it makes men more effeminate, and they lose testosterone from eating soy.
I don't think that is at all confirmed by the evidence, as far as I'm aware. I don't know, but I'm
not an expert. I'm not presenting that as a doctor. I'm presenting that as satirical content that might be true.
Okay. I need to apologise and set the record straight because I talked about women's breast milk. There is no women's breast milk. There is the milk from breasting humans.
Oh yeah,
it's important
chest-feeding humans.
Right.
Chest feeders.
Yeah, chest feeders.
Yeah.
Let's not even call them humans.
Homo sapiens that secretes milk products.
Or lactating Homo sapiens.
Now you're talking. That's a band, isn't it?
It is. My favourite band.
They're from San Francisco.
Yeah, they do covers of Bucks Fizz.
That would do it. I tell you something, on that rather milky note, let's move on swiftly if we can. More developments on the Canadian truckers in the Observer, Andrew.
So this is from tomorrow's Observer. This is the Canadian police arrest at least 100 protesters. As we know, they're breaking up the truck blockade in Ottawa, and there have been at least 21 vehicles towed as they've started to break up the protest camp. And this is the camp. This is the Freedom Convoy. It's quite interesting that in the Observer they call it the so-called Freedom Convoy, which pretty much lets you know where the Observer stands on this. No, it's called the Freedom Convoy, right? You don't need to start doing these snarky kind of.
It's how it's branded, and it's what they're fighting for.
It's how it exactly. There's no point in calling it the so. But this is the bizarre thing about all of this is, and I've had a few spats on Twitter sort of trying to get to the heart of this. It's like, it feels to me like any mass protest protest movement is always going to attract a fringe of unpleasant people, and that's whether it's from the left or the right or whatever it is. But what you don't do is focus on that tiny fringe and say that that is representative of the whole thing, because if you do that, you scupper any future protest that you might support, right? So it's in everyone's interest just to be realistic about this, and it's very interesting that the first thing that Trudeau did is say, not to address what the protest is about, which is about vaccine mandates, it's about the fact that they won't be able to cross the border without the vaccine passport, and by the way, 90% of the truckers were already voluntarily vaccinated. Forget about all that. He started saying they're all Islamophobes, transphobes, homophobes, racists, all of this misogyny, all of this stuff that's absolutely straight from his sort of social justice playbook and has absolutely nothing to do with what's actually going on. I think the propaganda over this has been utterly insane, particularly from the media.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you've stuck up for the truckers, Andrew, because many on the left, which you are despite what parts of the internet say, have completely abandoned the truck. Well, most of the left. And here we have the Guardian.
People.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's because the people who call themselves left now have no interest in class politics.
They hate the working class. And this is the apotheosis of that. Look, as you said, the Guardian is saying here, fringe elements, including far-right activists, nationalist groups and conspiracy theorists have played a central role in the protests from the start. So it's absurd. And what amazes me is that these people, that Trudeau can, apparently if you have the right views, if you're one of the good people, you can do just about anything. Trudeau's frozen their bank accounts, or he can now do that with the Emergencies Act. Also, they were talking about seizing dogs the other day. They're going to seize your dog, and if you don't claim it after 8 days, it will be relinquished. Who knows what that means? And surely that crosses the line for everyone, like the dogs. They're going after the dogs, but still people are on their side, Trudeau's side.
It's the lack of concern about civil liberties and the way in which people are just waving through these, and I will say the word, authoritarian measures when it comes to peaceful protest, I should emphasise. Now, it's really also, I think, quite important that, we have a discussion about this sort of conflict between freedom of protest and public nuisance, which can be called, right? So, but what you don't do is bring in the riot guards. I saw a horrible footage today of police horses trampling over protesters, and
it was a disabled person as well got trampled on the floor in some way.
I just think we've got, I get it, when you've seen sort of Extinction Rebellion protests and they can't be moved, but I have seen with my own eyes the police peacefully remove people from somewhere when they are breaking the law because of their blockades or whatever. There's a way to do it without freezing their bank account, saying that you're going to causing physical harm, smearing them all as far right or whatever it is,
because then you lose the moral high ground.
And this is also why Extinction Rebellion, for instance, are saying, no, we can't start smearing these truckers like this. We can't start denying them civil liberties. This affects... it's not about left or right. It's about the fact that a democracy needs the right to peaceful protest, and if it goes over the line into criminality, there has to be a way to resolve that without authoritarian measures, surely.
And speaking of authoritarianism, what was hilarious was that China and Iran condemned Canada in tweets. So when China is condemning you, do you know what I mean?
Wow,
and then Canada did that tweet about Cuba supporting the protests there, lacking a sense of irony there. My question is, why has Trudeau doubled down so much? Why was this vaccine mandate so important to him? Yes, now it's become a larger protest about all COVID measures and Trudeau himself, but at the start, couldn't he have just said the science has changed or something and got rid of this ridiculous mandate?
What you mean, it's like an ego thing that he has to preserve?
Yeah, he's destroying himself now, which is good for me, but why has he gone so far over this petty mandate?
Yeah, well, we've actually got some breaking news on this. We're hearing from Pyongyang and the leader of North Korea that, and it's a direct quote, China is now an anti-democratic hellhole. So there you go. Trudeau being thrown shade by Kim Jong-un. Now, let's move on to some positive news. Foie gras is still on the menu. This one's from The Eye. Nick, what is foie gras?
Well, it comes from the duck's liver when it becomes fatty. So it's a delicacy inevitably in France, but less so here, where we've banned the making of foie gras because it involves force-feeding ducks, which is all a bit unsavoury. No pun intended. Am I
right in thinking that a pipe goes into down their throat?
A tube goes down their throat, yeah.
And then what? It gets pumped into their stomach?
Yeah. And I don't... Look, I've never eaten foie gras. I only eat breast milk now, but since the last break. But,
I got to say, it's working. Look at those guns.
Thanks, mate. But the only thing is, this is a bit... So what's happened here is we were going to say you can't import it anymore, but now people like Jacob Rees-Mogg have said, well, hang on, do we need this law? Because actually, it's probably not... His argument is it's not going to make much difference because we already don't do foie gras here. It's just going to carry on in other countries anyway, and it's a pointless ban. Obviously, the other side is, look, it's inhumane. Andrew's waiting to come in because he's a vegetarian, but let me just... quickly finish and say some people, just to give balance, point out that...
Let's not do that. Let's not make a habit.
You don't want to do the balance?
We don't do balance on headliners.
Well, I didn't have time, but there's a lot of articles...
Reassuringly partisan.
If you have time to read them, there's a lot of articles about how, and I'll be hated for this, but apparently you can do it ethically because ducks have a different esophagus. They don't suffer in the way that you would imagine. When you hear it, it sounds horrific. Apparently there are ethical ways of doing it. I've heard...
This sounds like a line being spun by a butcher, doesn't it?
Unbelievable.
Well, I've read up on it, but obviously I'm just giving the balance, but obviously that's not everyone's view.
Well, look, no, the thing is, Jacob Rees-Mogg has said that his concern is about personal choice when it comes to the consumer, OK? But we do have to think about animal rights as well, the personal choice of the geese and the ducks who have tubes rammed down their throats, force-fed until their livers are fattened. It is a form of torture, right? And you can say, well, foie gras is really nice, which I suspect is the main argument here. But, you know, we do have a responsibility as the top of the food chain to look after our animals and to not mistreat them, particularly those who are, you know, cultivated for the production of meat and whatever. And I just think this is a no-brainer for me. I don't think any kind of... it's the same reason why in abattoirs I would be against any kind of excessively cruel method of slaughter that prolongs pain needlessly, either for religious reasons or anything else. I don't think it's right. I think we have a responsibility to look after animals.
But the animals this will still happen to them. We just won't be. It's not actually going to change that, is it? We've already banned it.
Yeah, we've banned it, exactly.
But by not importing it, I'm saying it'll still go on. It just won't be imported here.
Well, that might be true.
Then it will be a smaller industry and there will be less suffering.
Exactly. And shouldn't we be putting pressure on other countries to...
Because I'm the ultimate carnivore, and I will die on you know, whatever, on that hill for the right to be an omnivore, because I think that's the optimum human diet. But unnecessary pain just can't be justified, can it? I mean, it's not really about feeding the population, is it?
The only
people who need foie gras are seriously posh people.
Yeah,
you know.
Look, I've never had it. The only thing, I'm just trying to be fair. One article I read suggested it is also a bit of a storm in a teacup because factory farming is the big issue, and this is such a relatively minor issue compared to that maybe we should be focusing on factory farming more.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, but you can focus on both. I think you're absolutely right. I think.
But there's also boiling octopus as well, and other sea life that gets boiled alive.
I think it's outrageous. Leave them alone. And maybe they'll evolve to be even more sort of sophisticated creatures than we will, and they'll get their payback then.
So what do you think's best? Should we just, like, wait for cows to die of old age? You know, they're just sort of hobbling around the field with creaky knees.
Or just go for corn. Corn's pretty good.
Yeah.
And all of these plant-based stuff.
Corn, it's mycoprotein, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
It's basically a fungus, a bit like...
It's like a mushroom.
Like a mushroom.
Fancy mushroom.
British invention, I'm told.
I believe it was an accident. I think it was some sort of laboratory
accident. It tastes like it, I've got to say.
Yeah, I disagree. I think it's a wonderful
It tastes like an accident in your mouth.
I disagree.
If that's not a slogan.
I will die on this hill. I promise.
How do you have your corn? What do you do with it? I mean, I have got some in the freezer, I'm not going to lie.
I don't do anything with it. I just put it in the oven and it's done.
I get not need to go in something so that you don't know you're eating corn.
Andrew, you would die in a hill because you have so little energy from eating corn.
Oh, well, that's nothing to do with my diet. That's just me being lazy and unfit.
Exactly. You won't get the gains from corn in the gym. It's just not going to happen.
You're a bodybuilder. You know, we have a very different... You've got a kind of Arnold Schwarzenegger physique.
Thank you.
And I don't have anything like that, you know?
Andrew Doyle, the face of corn here in the UK. A hamper of their latest goods will be on their way to GB News, I've got no doubt. Lots more to get through, some amazing stories, including lie detectors, Navy conspiracies, and a rather intense no-mask policy. See you after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back to Headliners. With me looking at tomorrow's papers are two absolute Gs in the form of the notorious Andrew Doyle and the original gangster Nick Dixon. I didn't understand that introduction because I'm 47. So let's move on.
I'm white.
And let's have a look at the Observer. And the NHS have severed links with a gambling awareness organisation, Andrew.
Yeah, this is a group called Gamble Aware, which raises monies to deal with the obviously widespread gambling addictions. It describes itself as an independent grant-making charity commissioning prevention and treatment services, but it is almost entirely funded from the gambling industry. And as a result of that, the NHS is saying that it can't accept further, it has to sever all links because obviously that's where the money comes from. And this raises a debate, doesn't it? Because actually the cause is obviously very good and very important, but then is the money in some sense tainted because it's from that industry? I mean, I'm not convinced that it is. I often think this about, you know, sort of major avaricious corporations that are evil in every sense, but they do have a philanthropic department that gives millions to charity and very good causes. And I think, well, I'd rather that some of their money was going to these really good causes. I'd rather something good was coming out of this. So I don't see why it's necessarily a problem, but
I think it means that these gambling giants are engaging with the issues as well, because every time you have to write a cheque, it's human nature that you'll think about the cause when you hand over that money.
Yeah, I mean, they're alleviating their own conscience to a degree, aren't they? Because, I mean, they are...
No, they're just very good people.
I do think that idea...
I'm delighted to say that this suit is sponsored by Betfair, but... Listen,
I knew that. I wasn't going to say it, but, you know, it's out in the open now.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's the same with the fast food industry, who sponsor health initiatives.
Well, why not?
And for example, the Olympics are sponsored by Coca-Cola, McDonald's. Local football, kids football, you know, junior football is sponsored by soft drinks giants.
I don't have a trouble with this at all. I mean, what would be the alternative? Just that they don't give any money to anything.
I know what you mean. There is some questionable rhetoric around gambling, like gamble responsibly, as Ray Winston's always telling us. There's no such thing as gambling responsibly. It's almost...
It's called winning.
It's an oxymoron, isn't it? Gambling is the exact opposite of being responsible.
I've been to Epsom racecourse with Ray Winston. He's reckless with his gambling.
Is he really?
So have you ever actually gambled?
It's like money, no object.
Have you gambled, Mark?
Yeah, my dad is Irish, and going to the races is a great Irish tradition, and I really enjoyed it, but we had a rule, £1 a race. And so that's enough just to make you interested in the outcome of the race, but it won't bankrupt you.
Shall I tell you my gambling story? I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast, Dangerous Misinformation, and there was a guy talking about how he'd gambled and made loads of money from it, from this system called the Martingale system. So I suddenly thought, I'll try that. And then I put in $2,000, which was nearly all my money, into an online gambling thing. And I immediately got up to $8,000 in 3 days. And I was like, I'm a genius. And in my head, I'd quit comedy. I was like, this is going to be my life now. I just gamble online. Then suddenly I started losing it. Lost. I know. And I suddenly realised, oh, this is gambling.
That's how it works.
And I had a sick feeling in my stomach. And I was like, oh, this is gambling. And I thought I'd cracked it until then. And then I got down. I still came out with $2,000 profit. But I realised, don't gamble, kids. It doesn't work. And I always lost after that. But yeah, for a minute, I thought, this is my new life.
Well, look, if you are going through issues around gambling, it's a deadly serious problem that affects individuals and their families and their friends. It can affect careers. You can lose your house in a night, as we well know. So if you're having trouble, do reach out. There are lots of online resources. In fact, Martin, have a little look if you can, and we'll see whether we can make some suggestions about where you can go if you're going through a tough time when it comes to gambling, or someone that you know. We'll give you that information before the end of the programme. Luckily, Nick Dixon had a lucky escape. Sunday Telegraph next. The Green Party are being sued by their own spokesman, Nick.
Yeah. Yes, Green Party spokesman sues after sacking over transgender views. This was Shara Ali essentially, he expressed gender-critical beliefs. He basically said there's women, they exist, and so they sacked him. Now he's suing them. And he's managed to get a crowdfunding campaign. Hope he's not using GoFundMe because they have been known to freeze funds.
That's true.
But he's going to hit back by suing them, and that's essentially the point. And he's pointed out the hypocrisy of it all. He's pointed out this sort of aggression of the be kind mob. He says there's nothing compassionate in politics about the passive-aggressive injunction to just be kind or else. And so he's hitting back at this unfair treatment.
I mean, the Green Party's out of control when it comes to these issues. I mean, they've also said that they're going to suspend any member who signed the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. And they've said about Shahar Ali that his decision to champion a highly controversial position is not compatible with his roles. You know what this highly controversial position is? He says a woman is commonly defined as an adult human female and genetically typified by two XX chromosomes.
Disgusting.
Right, so, I mean, this is absolutely insane. So, apparently, the view of every member of the medical and biological community and 99% of people in the country that there are such things as men and women, that's now a highly controversial view. Even trans people don't think that that's not true. You know, it's like this weird,
Caitlyn
bizarre...
Jenner, the most famous trans woman in the world, doesn't take that view. And I don't like the language of this, Andrew. The idea of transgender views. It's not a view.
It's not true.
This is medical biology.
It's not true. If there's no such thing as biological sex, there's no such thing as being trans. And that is something that Blair White, the trans writer, said explicitly on Twitter, and she's absolutely right about that. This is utterly insane.
It's quite funny, the time as well, it comes after that swimming video was going around of the person winning by a whole length. Do you remember the trans swimmer, Leah Thomas, the trans swimmer?
And quite palpably unfair.
Yeah, although I'm in favour, actually, because if you think about it, the more... I can't say this. the more that trans people win, the more they win in swimming, it'll discourage women to go into sports, right? And then they'll go back into, like, just being in the home. And it's actually an ultra-conservative agenda.
I knew there was some kind of incel stuff coming.
I support the ultra-conservative trans agenda. That's all I'm saying.
Right. And rather than swimming, they'll be squirting their own breast milk into bottles to be dispatched via the Royal Mail.
I think we're going to have to put a stop to this, aren't we?
To creepy bodybuilders like Nick Dixon.
I don't know where this show is going, but I'm not comfortable.
Well, that's very much the idea of the show. Now, moving on. This one will send shivers down the spines of cheating spouses and terrorists everywhere. Lie detectors are back, and they mean business. This is in the Mail on Sunday, Andrew.
Yes, so apparently this was a terrorist who was sent back to jail after failing one of these polygraph tests, this lie detector test. And these are new powers, and apparently this was only introduced last June. And this is the first time that someone's actually been sent back to prison for failing the test. It's only been used apparently in 14 cases. And all of this came about because you remember that was an absolutely horrific attack at Fishmongers Hall in 2019.
Absolutely.
It was absolutely horrible, and that was the convicted terrorist. He convinced people that he had reformed, and then he went off to murder two Cambridge graduates. It was an absolutely horrible event, and this has come off the back of that. And I was thinking, I mean, I didn't realise that polygraph tests were that effective. Now, apparently, I looked into it, apparently they're accurate between 80 and 90% of the time. So, obviously, there's a margin for error, and you couldn't use this in a jury system or something like that. But when it comes to making decisions about palpably dangerous people who have already been proven to be dangerous, about whether or not they should be released, it strikes me as a reasonable idea.
Why didn't it come? It didn't say in the story, but why didn't it come in before? Why was it only last June? Because essentially what they've gone and said, did you do terrorism? He's gone, no. It's gone, and then they've got him. So,
well, I suppose it's because they didn't know. Maybe they didn't know about whether or not they would be effective.
Or isn't it more? Or is it a human rights issue?
It could be a human rights issue. Well, maybe, but I don't see how, particularly in this case. As I say, it would be if you were convicting people on the basis of tests. I've seen Basic Instinct. I know it's possible to fool those polygraph tests. Well, Sharon Stone does it in that film.
Weirdly, that's not the bit of the film that sticks in my mind.
Really?
Yeah.
Andrew's a bit different.
It actually demonstrates, I think...
I don't know what bit of the film you're talking about.
about Andrew Doyle that you're talking about.
Oh, you're talking about the ice pick murder. I know exactly what you mean. It was a brutal, memorable scene.
Now you're talking.
Yeah.
Nick, this polygraph thing's a problem for you because you're always sweating.
Always.
What? Is that some sort of
Have you got
Prince
a guilty
Andrew
conscience?
reference? I can't sweat because of a rare condition. I thought this was well known.
Yeah, we'll take your word for it. Let's move on now. And the next story is from the Sunday Times, and I would like to personally congratulate President Xi for his continued support of GBNews. Nick, how is our dear leader?
He's absolutely...
We've got Betfair and the Chinese Communist Party.
And Quorn.
Quorn.
The face of Quorn, Andrew Doyle.
And a couple of powerful Russians.
Yeah. So this is China's schools must teach thoughts of Chairman Xi. Chinese schools have been ordered to appoint political commissars to ensure that all children receive instruction on President Xi's ideology and definition of the rule of law. So young children will be learning all about Xi and why he's brilliant and new era thoughts. And pupils as young as 6 will learn that to sow the seeds of love of the party and love the nation and love socialism. So what it is, it's essentially they're getting in there early and training kids. So it'll be little like maths things like if Sally has 12 apples, you know, and sells one every 3 months, then Xi is great. Hail Xi. It's stuff like that. And I actually applaud this. I'll tell you why. Because at least it's honest. At least they're just simply getting in there and saying hey or Xi. Whereas what we have in our schools, or especially in America and here now, is we have critical race theory that kind of gets in far left ideology by the back door and claims it's doing a great thing. This is just straightforward route one. Xi is great.
Mean, the people trying to bring critical race theory into the schools won't even call it critical race theory.
Right.
You know, that's how sneaky they are about it. You know, and obviously, and then you end up with kids divided up by race, which has actually happened at the American school in London.
They argue they're just dealing with facts and teaching the truth of the world.
Yeah, but it's quite dangerous because it's so sophisticated. Whereas what China's doing here is not that sophisticated.
Who's surprised that China would? I'm
not surprised.
Do you think that British pupils could be brainwashed into thinking Boris Johnson's a great Prime Minister?
No, I don't think that's possible. I think we have to remain within the realms of possibility.
Let's not get silly now. Moving on, The Observer once more, and author Joanne Harris has turned down a book deal, Andrew.
Oh, yes. So Joanne Harris, who wrote Chocolat, I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's a very sophisticated book. So she has turned down a US book deal because the publishers demanded that she took out the F-bomb. So she was swearing. There were swear words in the book. And they said, look, we're not going to publish it as it is. If you take out the swear words, then we'll publish the book. And she said, no, I'm going to keep my integrity. I don't, And she makes a very valid point, which is that, when you're an author, when you're a writer, you choose your words carefully. They're not just arbitrarily thrown down. And so to modify your creation on the basis of someone else's sensibilities is a betrayal of your own muse. Well, she didn't put it in I put it much better terms than she did, actually.
But what I'd rather read your book.
He's got about 3.
But it's not Chocolat, it's called Quorn.
Yeah, Quorn. That'd be a much better book, wouldn't it? But it's interesting because this has all come about in the midst of this debate about sensitivity readers. Joanne Harris actually supports sensitivity readers. She thinks it's good.
Tell us what a sensitivity reader is.
So publishing houses will if you're an author, you submit your manuscript to the publisher and then they submit it to someone else who goes through it with a fine-tooth comb and decides whether you have represented marginalised groups in the correct way, whether you've used microaggressions or language. Kate Clancy wrote an article about this for Unheard recently, and she exposed some of the interventions that sensitivity readers make, particularly on her manuscripts, and they said things like she shouldn't use the word handicap in the sense of impede, or she shouldn't use the word disfigure. I think she'd use the word disfigure in a metaphorical sense in relation to the landscape, and they said, well, that can be offensive. But you can see what's happening here is they're sort of attempting to police poetry effectively, and these people know nothing of art or the creative instinct. They know nothing about it. All they know about is what will offend other people. It's useless.
You've given a very generous a sensitivity reader is basically some melt that goes through checking that a book's not interesting, is my definition.
I mean, that's probably more concise.
Art is not a democracy.
Right.
The artist must reign supreme over their material.
Imagine if these people saw a Quentin Tarantino movie. In hindsight, the 90s were the high watermark of creative expression, weren't they? See, I'm not as the only social conservative here, I'm not too big on gratuitous swearing, but the idea that you can't say the F word in your own book.
It's worse than that. You mentioned Quentin Tarantino. There was an article in a major publication where they had counted the number of words that women in his films say compared to the number of words that men, as though you can just reduce a film criticism to a pie chart of representation. It's completely Philistine.
But these people also went through war movies saying there weren't enough women, getting killed in World War II and stuff. So
not enough women at Dunkirk.
We already had sensitivity readers, and that's the people that buy books and read them.
Exactly.
They are the sensitivity readers. If the book is obnoxious, offensive, intolerant, in any way triggering, it won't sell as many copies.
If you're reading
what
books, you're quite
to the
sensitive.
audience deciding?
Oh, God knows what they'd make of something like American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. They'd absolutely have a...
They didn't even like, even at the time, they didn't love that.
You know what? It would be a light comedy, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It would be
like a rom-com.
It would. It would be like You've Got Mail.
But you're right. With a happy ending. Jennifer Aniston.
Yeah.
Tom Hanks.
No one eats anyone. No one cuts them up. Yeah, lovely.
Now you're talking. Well, a couple of stories to squeeze in before the end of the show. The Sunday Telegraph next. The US Navy are in a bit of a maelstrom, Nick.
Yep, US Navy officers on trial after accusations of conspiring to trade secrets for sex parties. So the clean living reputation of sailors is being ruined here. It's essentially, it's being called the Fat Leonard Case because it revolves around this guy, Leonard Francis, who's a big guy, who's essentially, he's traded sex parties for information, and he already admitted to cheating the Navy out of at least $35 million in 2015, which seems a substantial sum, doesn't it? So that's roughly the story. That's it, really. Fat Leonard.
Yeah, it's well dodgy. Well, let's move on to our next one in The Observer, and it's about one of the more severe mask policies, Andrew.
Oh yes, so this is a horrible story. So this is a Las Vegas clerk who he was at a shop and a customer came in without a mask and the clerk shouted at him to say he must put the mask on. The guy refused, walked out with the produce that he'd intended to buy. A big fight started outside, and the clerk ended up shooting him, not fatally, but shooting him it was a serious injury. And then the clerk himself committed suicide, shot himself in the head a few minutes later. So it's an absolutely grisly, horrible... It's clearly something that started as a sort of a spat, an altercation, and because of the extent of the passion involved, it escalated to serious injury and suicide. And I think this kind of story is the best argument for gun laws.
Well, yeah, because it's the argument against mask mandates, because the mask mandate divides us all. This guy's gone absolutely mad about a mask. It also proves that people obsessed with masks are mental. He could have just let the guy off. He could have just let the guy off without wearing a mask. Nothing would have happened.
I can accept that it was obviously it was an overreaction, but I think the point is that most murders are crimes of passion, people getting too upset in the heat of the moment. So I think don't have a gun.
No,
that's what I think is immoral. Well, that's what I think.
Mark wants to move on, so you can't say...
You know what? Yeah, I mean, I personally have never had strong views on masks, so nothing to see here. Our final story, you guessed it, it's from the Daily Star, which, by the way, is a cracking read and provides much-needed light relief on a daily basis. 80s legend Toyah Wilcox is being pestered by a ghost. Who's she going to call, Andrew?
Yeah, I really like this story. So, Toyah Wilcox, who, as you know, was a sort of early 80s punk act. She was in Derek Jarman's film Jubilee. I remember a very good performance in that. In fact, she was in his version of The Tempest. Really, really...
This is where Andrew brings...
Can I just say something really boring?
So high,
something really boring, which is I've met her and she's just an amazing person.
I've met her too, and she was lovely. Yeah. And what I would say about that, but apparently she's being haunted. And that's not fair, is it? Nice people get haunted, so her house...
I've met her too. I was in her house.
And were you... badgered by a poltergeist?
No, it seems to be very easy to access, doesn't it?
What I like about this story is that apparently she's tried to stage an exorcism to get rid of the ghosts. Yeah. But Rula Lenska went over there and she confronted some spirits as well. So all kinds of celebrities are getting involved.
But they're all flame-haired beauties. What's that all about?
Tori Amos was probably there. I mean, it's not mentioned, but I'm sure she was.
Yes. Sharon,
Carol Decker,
Skulls.
There's loads.
There you go.
Yeah.
By the way, was that gingerist?
I think it was a bit offensive, potentially. Yeah. I think you should apologise just in case.
Last word.
No, I was going to say, my only joke was it's a mystery. Then I know it's the Daily Star use it as a headline, so that's the kind of level I work on. But I do like that she said the majority of spirits she really likes, but if they're evil, they can F off, which is a great policy.
I want to, on that rather expletive note, thank the amazing Andrew Doyle and Nick Dixon, two of our absolute favourites. I know you will agree with that. Headline is back tomorrow at 11. We talked about if you've got issues with gambling. My brilliant team have a couple of resources that they can suggest, including gamcare.co.uk. That's gamcare.co.uk. Oh, sorry, forgive me, gamcare.org.uk. That's gamcare.org.uk. You've also got your GP and begambleaware.org. There is support, so do reach out. Hey, thanks for your company, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Look forward to it.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for...
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at